Good morning. My name is David Sebastian. I'm with Farm Bureau Financial Services. We're an insurance company in Des Moines, Iowa. And we're not quite sure whether we're a retailer or not, but we're working on it. I have the privilege this morning of introducing Sally Jewell. Sally is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Recreational Equipment Incorporated, what we commonly call REI. And they are the nation's largest consumer cooperative. They provide gear and clothing for active outdoor adventures out of 100 stores scattered across the United States and a website, www.rei.com. REI has consistently been recognized by Fortune magazine as one of the 100 best companies to work for in America, and last year received the Employer of the Year award from the World Retail Congress in Barcelona, Spain. Prior to joining REI, Sally spent 19 years in the commercial banking industry. That's a jump. Okay. And she is also a regent of the University of Washington. She serves on a whole variety of corporate and nonprofit boards, including, I got to read these now and I'm getting old, Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust, REI, National Parks Conservation Association, and the Initiative for Global Development. Sally said I had to keep this short, so we're done. Welcome, Sally Jewell.
Thank you. Thank you, David. How are y'all doing? You probably need to go to the bathroom, right? If you do, just get up and go. I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I had thought that I would be coming here about the same time we were going to open our 107th store, this one in Tucson, but the deal flipped thanks to General Growth's challenges. So we're right in the thick of what's happening in the retail industry, and Carl's comments a few minutes ago were right on the mark with what we're experiencing. I think the biggest difference between us is I think it's going to last a lot longer than he is. I hope he's right and I'm wrong, but we're gearing up for if it's the other way around. I want to talk a little bit about, your whole theme here is on innovation, and my comments may not seem about the latest and greatest technology or those elements of it in there. It's really innovation in the way we do our business. And while we are unique as a cooperative, I will tell you that there's nothing that we're doing at REI that couldn't be done in a public company, and I wish was done in more public and private companies. And you heard a couple of examples, I think, yesterday with Tom's Shoes and with TerraCycle on maybe a new business model. So I won't repeat this. You know what's going on in the headlines. You know what's out there. We just heard from Carl. 2009 will be painful, 2010 uncomfortable, and in 2011, retailers can begin to grow again, and that's moody'seconomy.com. Jobless claims set a new record. You heard today from Carl that those are continuing to go up now, 8.6%, I think, unemployment. NRF is still expecting year-over-year sales declines through the first half of the year with a turnaround at the end of 2009, and I think that's only because you're comping against the worst holiday season ever. So maybe there's some hopeful signs. I don't think there's too many hopeful signs. I think what we're seeing in the stock market is what I would call a dead cat bounce. I didn't make up that term, but I think there's still a lot of challenges out there that we're going to experience. Good news, shark attacks are on the decline. So unfortunately, it's because fewer people are going to the beach, but that's okay. So how did we get here? Well, Carl just told us how we got here, so I won't repeat this, except that we had a run-up in stocks and a sense of wealth that evaporated very quickly. We had a tremendous amount of home construction, and there's nothing, no greater example of that than here in Arizona, particularly 100 miles north in the Phoenix market, where you really had a tremendous run-up, and that's impacting the Southwest overall more than any other part of the country. You had, as Carl pointed out, a run-up in consumer debt and people using their credit cards, and REI certainly benefited from that. Our comp store sales for the 3 prior years before this one were close to 10% comp store sales. Our typical KPI would be 5%. If we were doing 5% comp store year in, year out, we'd feel good about it. We were actually running 5% through October 14th of last year. We ended the year up 0.3%. So that's what happened in November and December at REI, and I think that's what happened in so many retailers, and we are planning negative 5% comps this year, and there's significantly negative plans in the first quarter and not rebounding until we're comping against those ugly numbers from November and December. That's good. So our numbers are sequential, or roughly sequential, and we're now up to 10 million. So this is member number 2. I like to say she's 99 and a half years young. She's still with us. She and her husband Lloyd founded REI with a group of climbing buddies in 1938. So we're 71 years old now as an organization. And we have an aspiration to thrive as a co-op, serving outdoor enthusiasts 100 years from now and beyond. So that's difficult. It's difficult to thrive as a co-op because I think you actually have to run your business better than a public company or private company because you don't have access to outside capital. Serving outdoor enthusiasts, well, you have to have outdoor enthusiasts. We don't want to thrive by selling outdoor-themed virtual video experiences 50 years from now. So that means you actually have to have people who want to do that stuff, and you have to have places for them to go, and you have to be able to do that in a way that is in harmony with the environment and sustainable. So it's more difficult than it sounds. So as David mentioned in the introduction, we are a co-op. These are a handful of member photos that they submit each year. We asked a couple years ago if members would just submit photos of themselves in the outdoors if they were interested. We got like 3,500 within a week. So people are very excited, and they are reflective of this entire country in so many ways. As I mentioned, 10 million members, about 3.7 million active shopping with us last year. And one of the best things we have in terms of being a co-op is being able to have our members and our owners and our customers be one and the same. So there's another phone call. Somebody can get that. You might turn off your cell phones because it's, I'm sure, distracting for folks. One of the things that a public company has to worry about is shareholders. So you've got customers, employees, the community you're working in, and your shareholders. With a co-op, your owners and your customers are one and the same, which is very helpful because you can think with a longer-term view. And I just had our annual meeting of members on Monday of this week. I got there was, one of those, what I call cave people, Citizens Against Virtually Everything, who was critical that how come you only won 4 awards for your products this year? No other manufacturer has won 4 major major awards for their products, but that didn't matter to him. How come you dropped on the 100 best list? We actually went from 34 up to 12, so anyway, he was kind of cranky. But what I had the privilege of helping him understand was that our board is allowing us to be less profitable in 2009 so that we can maintain the service quality, we can maintain the employment, we can maintain the customer experience, because we're going to be around 100 years from now. So this isn't about driving the biggest top line possible, and that is a gift that we have as a co-op, and I took great pleasure helping explain that to him. So we have a core purpose. We inspire, educate, and outfit for a lifetime of outdoor adventure and stewardship. That's our core purpose, and that was really formed by asking our employees, our board of directors, and our friends several questions. One was, what does REI do? Well, we sell gear and apparel for active outdoor activities. Why is that important? Well, you answer that question. Why is that important? You answer the previous answer. And you do that 4 times, and pretty soon you get a much deeper sense of what this organization is all about. And that is something that I would encourage all of you to do within your businesses as well. We asked 2 other questions. Why do I, as an employee, devote my creative energies to this organization? And what would happen if REI went away? So those give you a sense of a higher purpose than selling stuff. So we inspire people to do things they aspire to do. We educate them to be able to have a more positive experience. If they want, we'll outfit them, but if they never buy anything from us, that's okay. If we're inspiring and educating them to have a lifetime of outdoor adventure and to recognize the importance of giving back. So quickly, REI today is 107 stores as of this morning. I'd hoped that 107th store would have been Tucson, but it's Brentwood, California. We opened one 2 weeks ago in Westminster, Colorado. So we are all over the country, primarily in the mountainous middle and the 2 coasts, not too much in the really flat, sparsely populated parts of the country. The upper left picture is our second prototype store, and that is in Round Rock, Texas. It uses 48% of the energy of a typical retail store. It brings natural light into every single dressing room. You know, what about trying on clothes where you're actually in sunlight as opposed to artificial light, and the colors look very different. The fixtures are made of rapidly renewables. So we're experimenting, and I've got a few more slides on that. Our website, rei.com, is roughly 20% of our business. It is the 54th most popular social networking site on the internet, and it's not a social networking site, it's a store. So what if, instead of just product reviews, where people don't just review the jacket that they're wearing, but they talk about the trip that they took to Patagonia and how they used it there, and then they want to post pictures? What if we facilitated that? And that is coming soon. We call it online community within the coming year. I mentioned our 70th anniversary. We produce award-winning gear and apparel, and we have a new ad campaign that's coming out now called Find Out, which is not just find the outside, but find out about adventures, how to get started, and how to do anything that you aspire to do. Now, one of the privileges of being this co-op is this ability to think long-term. So if you think of what Carl said a minute ago about globalization and developing countries being where a lot of the growth is, you've now got an interconnected world that is far smaller than it was before. And I think, as he pointed out, one of the risks that we have around protectionism is trying to lock down and go to the past and not admit that we are, in fact, an interconnected world. You've got remote villages all around this world that have access to the internet, where farmers can actually check the price of the product before they decide whether to pick and ship that product. So it's a globalizing world. How do we adapt to that? And these, by the way, this was work that our board of directors did at a retreat, saying, what are the big things? In fact, I set the ground rules for the retreat. I was a new CEO, this is 4 years ago, and I knew that I didn't want the board messing in the details, which boards tend to do. And so we had a rule, and it was no discussion by management or the board for anything that's not happening 25 years in the future and farther out. So that was the rule. We came up with 4 things and later added a 5th that are megatrends that we know going forward 50 years are going to be impacting our business. So globalization is one. Urbanization is another, and Carl mentioned this as well. He talked about exurbs, but the reality is around the world, people are moving to cities. So we all recognize this city. This is New York. That is Central Park. It takes no imagination whatsoever to say what this would have looked like if the founding mothers and fathers of New York City hadn't put in Central Park. It is an incredible oasis in a densely populated area. So when you're REI and you're thinking long term and people are moving to cities, and this is happening nowhere faster than China right now, if you don't plan parks and bike paths and pedestrian corridors and ways for people to connect with green and nature, how will we be in business 100 years from now? You won't have outdoor enthusiasts because nobody will know what the outdoors is. They will perceive that it is very hard, very far away to get to anything that remotely represents the outdoors. So for us, urbanization means how do we bring the outdoors into people's everyday lives? So here in Tucson, it's a great cycling community. You're surrounded by Saguaro National Park on both sides. How do you, here it might be easier, but in a place like Phoenix, as it gets denser and denser, and it takes a lot longer to get out of town, or Denver, how do you bring the outdoors into people's everyday lives so they're not so intimidated about going outside? Demographic shifts in the population. Carl showed you the age ones. I'm not talking about the racial and ethnic makeup of this country. The racial and ethnic makeup of this room looks relatively consistent with what I would say I see in the outdoors and I see in REI. That is a huge problem for us, REI. If we want to thrive 100 years from now and beyond, how do we reach into the broad, rich diversity of the United States to introduce activities that may not have been part of someone's culture or someone's traditional recreation, or maybe in some cases, they aren't that many generations from having to camp. So this is, maybe camping isn't viewed as having arrived. So I like to say this picture represents the Supreme Court of the United States 50 years from now, or at least part of the Supreme Court. We are going to be a diverse, very diverse nation. It's one of the strengths of this nation. We have a president that reflects that. He's put in a cabinet that reflects that. We live in a representative democracy. If we want to have national parks and public lands and city parks and open spaces, we better make sure that the people that represent us in the future have felt welcome, have felt that that's an important part of their lives, and it's going to be essential to our future. Technology. Technology has tied us to electrical outlets for 50 years, really since the television came into play. And we have the potential of it liberating us going forward. So here's some statistics to tuck away. The average child, age 6 to 18 today, spends 46 and a half hours a week in front of a screen in their off time. Not doing schoolwork, but in their free time, versus 30 minutes a week in unstructured outside play. Go play outside, I'll call you when dinner's ready. It's just not happening. Stranger danger, neighborhoods organized around schools, overscheduled kids that are so tied into soccer practice and karate and other things if they're affluent, or perhaps technology being tied inside or not so positive activities if they're not, but they're not playing outside again. Technology's got an opportunity now to liberate us. Satellite-enabled, mobile technology, battery life, optical recognition. And I've spoken with Nintendo and Microsoft and DigiPen, which is a grad school that cranks out folks that design technology things, to say, we have this growing disconnect between children and nature, and yet technology can take us forward. Is there some way you can apply your learnings to an industry that's beginning to get vilified in many ways for its products and make it positive as opposed to negative by reconnecting people with the outdoors and nature? And I've actually gotten some great traction on that. And last is climate change. We believe it's real. We know we're part of the problem. So how can a company like REI reconcile with itself when it's cutting down trees to produce catalogs, when it's burning electricity creating products that end up in a landfill? What's the impact on the landfill? There's all kinds of things around climate change, and we know we have to lead. And we know that it's going to be difficult, but our aspirations are to be climate neutral by 2020, and we're well on our way, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. So we like to talk about the virtuous cycle at REI, and oversimplified, and you can apply this in so many ways as a contradiction to the vicious cycles we're all feeling. Introducing people to the outdoors so that they can develop a lifelong love of nature. Some will give back. We hope to inspire that in an urban setting or in a rural setting that protects our landscapes and supports our business. So that's kind of the virtuous cycle that we like to talk about. And I want to talk about new business skills and how you do that. And it's got three main elements. It's about people, it's about the community, and it's about the planet. So let me talk about people for a second. You got to create a great environment. And I know that unemployment's high, and I know it's high in retail, and it's difficult to choose to find a place to work. I have a CFO search going on right now. I have 535 applications for that one position, which is overwhelming. But the reality is people want to work for an environment where they feel appreciated. And we will get back to a time when jobs are scarce again. We will need to attract older workers as well as younger workers when you look at those demographics. Anybody care to guess how old REI's oldest employee is? Just guess. Throw a number out. Did I tell you at the table? I probably did, so you don't count. 81, 78. Any others? 99, no, she doesn't work for us anymore. 92 is the answer. His name's Mountain Bob, and he works for us in Reno, Nevada. He retired from the video production industry in Southern California. He lost 2 wives who died along the way, and he is probably the most active of our employees in service projects, getting out and connecting with the outdoors. He knows the Nevada mountains. People look for him when they come and shop, and every once in a while he has to take a nap on a fixture. So one of the managers will say, "Hey, Mountain Bob, I think it's time for a break." But he's an incredible employee. And I was mentioning at the breakfast table this morning, we just opened a store in Santa Fe, New Mexico a year ago. It's either 40 or 60% of our employees there are retirees. We have 6 PhDs from Los Alamos National Labs that work for us. We have 1 MD who's about my age, and she just said, "I've had enough of medicine." So she's working for us, I don't know, $10 an hour, something like that, and loving it. So people matter, and creating an environment where decision rights go to the right people. So can somebody at the front counter, when you come up and you've got a problem or something was mismarked, can they just deal with that for you? can somebody take care of a little problem or a big problem? And if decision rights go to the right people, that creates a great environment. We have wonderful benefits. We do all of those kinds of things, but I think it's that day-to-day environment that really makes a difference. So we are currently number 12 on the 100 best list. We've been on the list as long as there's been one. We've bounced around from the 70s to number 9. So where you are is sort of a crapshoot in each given year. In fact, I like to be below the top 10. But we try and create that environment. But it extends beyond the boundaries of our own employees. So we do work with factories all over the world. China is our biggest supplier. The picture in the upper right is the Youngwon Corporation making backpacks for REI. And this was from a factory visit that I did not too long ago. We can't just take care of the people that work in REI. We have to extend that to our vendor community through the working conditions, through auditing, to making sure that there's safe facilities, the ventilation is good, the people are well paid and well treated. And then our vendor community. The lower right are REI's Vendors of the Year nominees for 2009. They work very hard to uphold the kind of standards that we do as well. So people matter, and that's one of the critical legs of the stool. Next, getting around to the planet is on business stewardship, and we have a 5-fold strategy, and I'll jump into a little more detail on a couple of these. But one is around climate change and energy. We're committed to being climate neutral by 2020. That is very, very difficult. We had to begin by saying, what is our impact on the planet? We had a 3-day session 4 years ago that said, what's REI's, 5 years ago now, what's our impact on the biosphere? And it was enormous, and you have to boil that down to what you can actually do. So we came up with 5 things. On climate change and energy, you have to know what your greenhouse gas footprint is and where it is. So we mapped out our greenhouse gas footprint by hiring an army of grad students for a summer from the Bainbridge Graduate Institute, working on MBAs in sustainability, and we know by every store what the carbon footprint is. And we went to the dirtiest markets first, and we replaced those energy contracts with Green East certified long-term power supply contracts. That one step reduced our greenhouse gas footprint by 25%. Actually, greenhouse gas footprint by 30% on 20% of our electricity. So that's one big step. Second is around paper and forest products. How can you reconcile hiking in the woods with cutting down trees to produce 60 million catalogs that go out to everybody every year? Forward Stewardship certified paper is one step, trying to reduce catalogs, get smarter about who we mail to, using technology to be really much more strategic, and eventually, of course, trying to replace that with electronics, although catalogs work, so that's why we haven't been able to do that yet, but it's a big step. Waste reduction and recycling. Here you had a great talk yesterday from TerraCycle. Garbage is something you pay for coming and going. And so it's really a bad thing. If you can reduce the amount that you use on the front end, packaging, reusing products like cardboard. We reuse a lot of the boxes that our vendors send us product in when we send products out to the stores. We've now got only 25% of our total waste stream actually going into garbage. And we'd like to get that further reduced. But this is one that is just so obvious, and you really need to work with partners like TerraCycle and others to get that done. Green buildings, I mentioned. The second prototype, that one, Round Rock, Texas, in the upper left. We put solar energy on 11 of our stores. We have, in the lower left, it's a little hard to see in that slide, but in our Round Rock store and our Boulder store, which are our 2 prototypes, we put the community room right in the middle of the store. So you come in and you're shopping and you see there's something going on. And that something going on might be a class for Boy Scouts on pitching a tent, or a course for women on how to change a bike tire. So it sort of draws you in and says, what's going on in there? And sort of how do I learn to do that? Or do they have clinics and classes that might be of interest to me? So green buildings is a significant part of what we're doing. Responsible products as well. So if you're creating products that are environmentally damaging in their process, are environmentally damaging at end of life, that's also very difficult to reconcile, particularly for a company like REI. So we are working, and I'll talk a little bit about this, with many others to create a market for responsible products, to inspire fabric producers, for example, to produce these things in a way that is much more environmentally friendly. The pack on the lower left of that picture is actually made from 44 recycled plastic water bottles. So there's a step going on in that direction, but a lot more to come. So here's a handful of pictures around our prototype stores. Solitubes on the lower right, which are the ones that bring that natural light into the dressing rooms, but actually in Texas, they're going from the roof down to the first floor. It's a 2-story store, and they're bringing natural light right into the first floor. We're using fixtures that are made from bamboo and recycled steel, but better yet, they are so durable, they're just not going to wear out. And the other thing about them is you can adapt them. They could be socks one day, pants the next day, and kayaks the day after that, depending on which kit of parts you put in there. So that boneyard in the top in the warehouse that most retail stores have is much, much smaller, so you can concentrate on improving your selling square footage. And these stores, as I mentioned, use half the energy of a typical store. Product stewardship, rapidly renewables like bamboo going into the products. Bisphenol A, controversial substance, some of you may have heard of it, in polycarbonate water bottles. It is a bioaccumulator, and it's been shown in high doses to laboratory animals to have a problem. It's very, very shaky in terms of whether it does, in fact, have a problem on humans, but the reality is consumers said, we're worried about this stuff, we don't want to see it anymore. We began working with our vendors a year in advance saying, we think there's an issue here, we need you to produce alternative products. And when we pulled all the polycarbonates off of our shelves, we took all those bottles and sent them to a recycler to use in a thermal mug, so the non-food portion of the mug is made with the recycled polycarbonate. But more importantly, our vendors were ready with product. And believe it or not, it drove an incremental $1 million in sales to REI because people ran in and replaced their bottles with steel or aluminum or the Triton plastic. So it really reflects something that I think is important, which is that sustainability is a team sport. You need to work along with your vendors. You need to work with other retailers. Upper left is a logo of the RELA Sustainability Initiative. RELA is a Retail Industry Leaders Association. I know there's many RELA members represented in this room. And Isaac introduced himself to me earlier from SAP, who's working with our team on the RELA Sustainability Initiative. Sustainability is not competitive advantage. Sustainability is the way we're all going to have to do our business. I am a fan of Walmart. I know you're out there, some of you, and thank you for sponsoring this. Because I think Walmart has taken a major step in this direction, and it has transformed itself in terms of recognizing its impact on the planet. And I think when Walmart moves, everybody has to move with it because it's so dang big. They are involved in the RELA Sustainability Initiative. And if we work together, we actually will create markets for this stuff and make our businesses a lot more economic than they are today. On the right-hand side is just a blackboard from our Boulder store illustrating tips for our customers on how they can make a difference in the planet themselves. So I want to wrap up with just a few programs on that next generation of enthusiasts for the outdoors. If you're going to be around 100 years from now, you have to engage youth. So we are working with the Passport to Adventure, which is available through all of our stores. It gives parents and kids 5 family-friendly hikes and 5 family-friendly bike rides very close into that area where they live to introduce outdoor recreation. We give kids a prize if they. It's like a summer reading program, except it's a summer hiking and biking program. PEAK stands for Promoting Environmental Awareness in Kids. Every one of the REI stores has PEAK curriculum, and they take it out and teach it to kids, and we've reached 500,000 children with that program since we started it in 2002. And the pictures really speak for themselves. We also work hard to increase participation in the outdoors, not only our community rooms, but outdoor schools and with our sales team. And then to really make a difference long-term, we have to make a concerted effort, we believe, toward embracing diversity and inclusion in the outdoors. And these are just a handful of logos of organizations that we're supporting, and there are hundreds like them who are specifically focused. In San Diego, we're doing a pilot to reach the Latino community. Aquatic Adventures, Wild Coast, or Costa Salve are 2 examples of great nonprofits. We have a person in that market that's specifically connecting with organizations to say, how does REI need to adapt? And what are the barriers to participation? And what might we be able to do to work with the community to get more kids and adults playing outside? In the middle of the rows is the New York Restoration Project. Bette Midler has got this nonprofit organization we just supported with a major grant who's taking these paved over pockets in New York and making them green. Community gardens for kindergartners and kids in school all across New York City. The YMCA is doing a great job. Outdoor Outreach is in LA. There's organizations like this that are connecting children to nature all over. These are a few pictures from a thing we sponsored on Red Top Mountain in Atlanta. Our second pilot market is Atlanta, Georgia, to say, what do we need to do within the African American community? What are we doing wrong? What is the community interested in? And here's a service project we did with Wild Coast in San Diego. This is that lovely fence that people in Arizona are probably somewhat familiar with. It's Tijuana and the bull ring right behind the fence. And on this side of the fence is the last marine estuary in the United States that's undeveloped on the coast of California, south of San Diego. 256 volunteers on the US side, 100 volunteers on the Mexican side, all wearing REI volunteer t-shirts, cleaning up garbage on the beach, and replanting the habitat in the marine estuary, where 75% of the watershed that flows into that estuary is actually in Mexico. It's a great example of cross-border, cross-cultural collaboration that brings everyone together, and our entire board of directors is interspersed in this picture because they came out and worked on this as well. Did I show that already? No, okay, so this is just a few photos of working on recreational lands together, and then coalitions and advocacy. If you've got all these kids who are spending time in front of a screen and not getting out, how do you create a movement? The Children in Nature Network is one way, sponsored by a fellow named Richard Louv, who wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. So if REI wants business in the future, how do we get kids to really connect with nature? And so we sponsored Nature Clubs for Families, which is a how-to guide to get things going so that kids aren't just so overscheduled, they actually do get a chance to connect together and go outside. And the upper right, the Conservation Fund started something called the National Forum on Children and Nature. 40 different organizations, Anheuser-Busch. So what are they doing there? Well, they have SeaWorld and Busch Gardens. Disney was there. The Sesame Network was there. Developers were at the table. You had all these odd bedfellows saying, we have a crisis with our children, and what can we do about it? So the organization brought all these together, and that's why REI funded the New York Restoration Project. We wouldn't have known about that. Or the Audubon Nature Centers, one of which is in Phoenix, that connects kids to the outdoors. And the bottom right is myself and a few colleagues lobbying on Capitol Hill. I was there yesterday. I testified in front of Raul Grijalva's subcommittee on in natural resources. Congressman Grijalva, you should be, if you're from his district, and many of you are, should be incredibly proud of what he's doing. If there's one single thing we could do to really catapult forward what we're talking about here, it is to put young people to work on our public lands, much like the Civilian Conservation Corps after the Great Depression. The chronic unemployment and young people of color around this country is really astounding. African American men, I think ages 18 to 25 or 16 to 25, it's 39%. It's 27% for the Latino community in that age bracket. If we take these young people and help put them to work on public lands, which are crumbling because we haven't been paying attention to the infrastructure over the years, what a difference it would make in their lives with work experience, with support for those public lands, and with education credit, because what he's looking at is a GI Bill type thing for these young people that do work on public lands is getting tuition support and mixing them with older Americans. So advocacy is really critical. So the results quickly, 326,000 youth participated in recreation through our programs last year. We did 142,000 peak demonstrations, 1.5 million hours of volunteer labor on our public lands. Worked on 15,000 acres of land, 6,500 miles of trail, and billions actually in national funding. So to wrap up with a quote from Charles Darwin, he said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." So for all of you who are in the retail business, it's not business as usual. You have to be adaptive to change, recognizing our impact on the planet, recognizing the importance of the environment you create for people, and recognizing the importance of healthy communities. Thank you very much, and if there's any time, I'll take questions. Any questions? Sorry, the light's right in my eyes, so I should have worn a baseball cap. I'm back there.
How do you manage your 10 million member base, and what are the main benefits?
Sorry, say again, how?
You said you have 10 million members.
Right.
How do you manage this database, and what are the main benefits?
So being a member of the co-op is a one-time fee to join. Right now it's $20. When Lloyd and Mary started, it was $1, and it's gone up in $5 increments, so it just went up to $20 last year. You join the co-op, and we return profits to you. So we had our own economic stimulus package, I like to say, the beginning of last month. We returned $73 million in dividends to our members, in addition to an REI Visa card we have through US Bank, which returned an additional over $30 million. So we had $105 million that went back into our members' hands, which for the first 6 months of the year they can use for merchandise purchases. For the last 6 months of the year, they can cash out if they choose to. So it really is an organization like Lloyd and Mary started it, where you buy a membership, and if the co-op is profitable, we share it back. So it's a buying cooperative. We have, just for simplicity's sake, said it's going to be 10% of your full price purchases. And that's what it's been really for the last 15 years or so. It used to fluctuate a little, 1% above, 1% below, but it was too complicated to explain. So that's the basic benefit. So $20 once in your life. In your first year, if you buy a jacket that costs $200 at full price, you've already paid for your membership. All of your other future purchases are dividendable. In addition, we've got special coupons for members, discounts on REI Adventures trips, discounts on rentals, and things like that. Over here.
Hi, I'm Lindsay from the University of Wisconsin-Stout, and you talked about globalizing, and I was just wondering if you see REI moving overseas in the future.
REI was overseas when I joined them in 2000. I had been on the board of directors for 4 years before I was asked to join the co-op, and was on the board when we decided that we would put a store in Japan. It was an interesting decision. What we had done, back to the membership question, is we had, over time, since REI opened its second store, is we chased the member. So we were a Seattle-based organization, one store, until 1975, when we opened our second store, and that was in what we like to call the People's Republic of Berkeley. Because Berkeley had mail-order members in some concentration, but still you had to say, is it okay to use co-op member money to go into Berkeley? Well, since that second store, we've expanded by going in. If any of you have been into our Tempe store, it's kind of a grubby location. It's not what you call great retail. It's surrounded by a kidney dialysis center on one side, and I think there might be a mortuary. So, we're getting a lot of cross-traffic from those. That's really beneficial. But for a long time, REI went to where the member was, and we found cheap real estate and said, you build it, they will come. So I'm telling you that because when the board and the management team decided to go into Tokyo, we chased the members. So we might have gone into a place like St. Louis, Missouri, because there were 3,000 members buying mail order. And when we put in a store, that would jump up to 20, 30, 40,000 members. In Tokyo, we had, in Japan as a country, we had 85,000 members. And in Tokyo, we had about 2/3 of that. And we thought, well, let's put a store there. But we did not quite what we did in Tempe, but we couldn't afford real estate in Tokyo, so we went off the bubble. And we put it in a community called Minami Machida, which was a long drive away from Tokyo. And the long and short of it is, as a co-op, with lack of access to outside capital, it was biting off more than we could chew. And we were spending a lot of money, and if you're going to go into a foreign country or place like China, you better be prepared to be there for 10 years and probably losing money for 10 years. And that is one of the downsides right now of being a co-op. So we closed the Tokyo store 1 year into it. We buried about just under $50 million, which was a lot of money. We are very fortunate that this economic climate was not overlaid on that period of time for us, because we had a lot of bank debt. We now are debt-free with a strong cash position, and at some point in the future, we will go overseas. But I've spent a lot of time in China, and this is one of the benefits of being a co-op. I've met with Chinese outdoor retailers, including the largest one, which is actually tiny. It's a company called Sanfo. They kind of, in many ways, have used their website and their membership, even though they're not a co-op, to look like REI. And my view is, how can we help the Chinese outdoor industry get started on the right foot? Because what's happening in China in terms of the environment is actually not very good for the world. There is not a lot of EPA action or NEPA or SEPA. There's a lot of roads going through very sensitive areas. There's a lot of challenges, and if we care about the planet, we can work with outdoor retailers to perhaps introduce some of these things and help them be successful. So that's more of our approach. But over time, we probably will have international stores, but right now it doesn't make sense, other than rei.com, and anybody can shop there, as long as they have US dollars. Any other questions? One over here.
Hey, Sally. Can you describe a little bit of the REI culture? Because I think that's a big reason for why you guys always are named to one of the best places to work in the country.
Yeah, one of the things that I got asked a lot about when I came on as a hired gun into the chief operating officer role, people thought, oh my God, here comes this banker and she's going to destroy the culture. And one of the common questions I got asked as I went to stores, and I get out to stores a lot, is, how do we maintain our culture as we grow? And I have to tell you that we're the highest we've ever been in these last few years on the 100 best list, because I think as we have grown, we have deepened our culture. So it's around this sort of notion of virtuous cycle. I mean, you don't get the incredible employees that we have representing us in the retail stores without them creating for themselves an environment where they enjoy coming to work every day. I think part of it is that core purpose: we inspire, educate, and outfit for a lifetime of outdoor adventure and stewardship. So if you're working there, you feel like you're not selling stuff. You feel like you're helping people have a better life. And so I think that that's one element, is that people really believe in what we're doing. The giving back element, the 1.5 million hours of volunteer service on public lands that we do, that is really fulfilling for employees. So as a store does a service project, or they go out to a classroom and do a peak class promoting environmental awareness in kids, or any of those things, it really, it just speaks to a higher purpose, and I think that that's a lot of what people feel. The other thing I would say is, you could have that and undermine it if you didn't have superb supervision. And I don't mean at my level, I mean the retail supervisor and the people on the ground. What kind of environment are they creating? And when you got Mountain Bob at 92, and Anita at 16 working in the same store, and Mountain Bob may know a lot from his years of experience, but he probably doesn't know as much about snowboarding as he could, and Anita probably knows a lot about snowboarding, but doesn't know much about how the world sort of fits together. If the supervisors use that to the advantage by helping our employees help each other, it's really powerful. And I have to tell you, we survey all employees every year. We get an 84% response rate. The engagement levels are really high. And the one thing I look at, and I spot check every supervisory group, I just look at them across the company, is that frontline supervisor is supporting that and allowing people to make thoughtful, sensible decisions right where the rubber hits the road. So I think all of those go in to create that environment. Thank you. I see folks lining up here, so I think I'm about to get the hook. Thank you very much.